Hey Brew Crew, welcome back to the channel. So today's video is kind of a weird one because this is technically a top 6, but it's not really about my favorite games, and it's not about the best games that I've ever played. This is actually a revisit of one of the very first videos that I ever made on this channel, back when the production quality was questionable, the lighting was also questionable, and I was still questionable. In that video, I talked about what I called my formative games. Not necessarily the games that I love the most today, but the games that made me realize what modern board gaming even was. The games that really introduced me to the hobby and all that it had to offer. The games that influenced my tastes in mechanics, my tolerance for complexity, my appreciation for certain types of player interaction, and honestly, how I even relate to people through games. Because I think for most of us, there's this moment where board gaming stops being that thing that you pull out on holidays when someone suggests Monopoly and starts becoming something that you actively want to explore, something that you want to learn more about, something that you start building shelves for, and then eventually organizing those shelves by mechanism or weight, which is a totally normal thing to do and not at all a sign that you've gone too far. So today I want to revisit the 6 games that made me the board gamer that I am today, and talk a little bit about what they are, how they play, and why each had such a big impact on me when I first encountered them. And we're going to go in absolutely no particular order because trying to rank nostalgia feels like a dangerous game. So, the first game that really opened the door for me was Citadels. And this was, without exaggeration, the first time I ever played something that made me go, oh, this is not the same type of board game that I grew up with. Because up until this point, most of my experiences with board games had been very luck-driven. Roll dice, move a piece, draw a card, hope something good happens. But Citadels was about making decisions, and more importantly, trying to predict what other people were going to do. In the game, everyone is trying to build up a city by constructing different districts using gold. That's basically the goal. But the way you actually get there is what makes the game interesting. At the start of each round, there's this selection of character roles like the assassin, the thief, the merchant, the architect, the warlord, and players take turns secretly drafting those roles for the round. Each of those characters gives you a different ability that will trigger when that role comes up in turn order. So maybe you take the assassin and decide that this round, the merchant doesn't get to exist. Maybe you're the thief and you're trying to figure out who took the king so that you can steal all of their income. Maybe you grab the architect because you've been quietly saving money and now you want to build 3 buildings in one turn. But the thing that really hooked me was that suddenly the game wasn't just about what I was doing, it was about trying to read the table. Who looks like they're about to build something expensive? Who's been hoarding gold? Who probably is going to take the warlord this round so that they can blow up someone else's building? And for the first time, it felt like my success or failure in the game was based on my choices, not on a die roll. And that realization was kind of a turning point. Because once I had played something where my decisions mattered rather than randomness, I immediately wanted more of that experience. The next big step in that journey was Pandemic. And this one was especially important because it wasn't just formative for me, it was formative for me and Jen. Pandemic was the first cooperative game that we really fell in love with. In this game, you and the other players are part of a global disease control team trying to stop 4 different viruses from spreading out of control across the world. You've got this map of interconnected cities, and over the course of the game, infections are constantly popping up. Cities are gaining cubes, Outbreaks are causing chain reactions into neighboring cities, and everything is slowly spiraling towards disaster. And on your turn, you're trying to do things like treat diseases, share knowledge with other players, move around the world, and ultimately discover the cures before the situation gets completely out of hand. And what really stuck with me at the time was that it wasn't competitive at all. We weren't trying to beat each other. We were trying very, very hard to not lose together. And that created a totally different kind of tension because now every decision mattered to the group. Do we spend actions treating this city before it outbreaks? Do we try to rush to a cure? Do we move the medic into position for next turn? And yeah, there was absolutely some quarterbacking involved. I'm not going to pretend there wasn't, but even with that, pandemic introduced us to this idea that a board game could be a shared puzzle, something that you work together through instead of against each other. And that really stuck with me. Then came Arkham Horror 2nd Edition. And this was my first big game. By that I mean this was my first big, epic, thematic game. The kind of game where you open the box and there are just bags inside of bags inside of bags. The kind of game where setup feels like a small project, where the rulebook is big enough that it starts to get a little intimidating. But Arkham Horror was also the first time I experienced a board game as a narrative engine. You're playing as investigators in this Lovecraftian town that's slowly being overrun by monsters and interdimensional gates, and over the course of the game you are traveling to different locations, encountering weird events, collecting items, gaining or losing sanity, fighting creatures, and trying to close these gates before an ancient one awakens and ends the world. And what made it special was that things were constantly happening. You were getting cursed, losing items, getting delayed by strange encounters, drawing story text that described something bizarre that had just occurred in this haunted museum or abandoned graveyard. It felt less like a puzzle and more like participating in a story that was slowly unraveling. And this was also the first game that I ever upgraded with custom components, which is the moment where I sort of crossed the line from liking board games to being invested in board games. Next up is Istanbul, and this one represents my first real experience with Euro-style game design. In Istanbul, you are controlling a merchant who is moving around this modular marketplace along with a stack of assistants. Each location on the board lets you take a specific action, maybe collecting goods, maybe you're trading them in, maybe you're upgrading your wheelbarrow so that you can carry more stuff. But the twist is that every time you move to a location, you have to leave one of your assistants behind in order to take the action there. And if you want to use that location again later, you have to go back and pick that assistant up before you can continue on. So now the game becomes this really interesting logistical puzzle where you are trying to plan out your route efficiently. You're trying to figure out how to move through the market in a way that gets you what you need without wasting time doubling back. And there's very little randomness involved. It's mostly about planning and execution. So this was another moment where I realized that good games give you choices. And this was also the first game that I bought at our friendly local game store, which was its own kind of eye-opening experience. I actually still remember that moment pretty vividly, walking in and seeing row after row of games, seeing all of these other folks who are also into this thing that I loved, chatting with the staff about what we liked and didn't like so that they could give us recommendations on where to start. They showed us a few games and also recommended a couple of YouTube channels to check out if I wanted to learn more. I sincerely think that my first experience with our FLGS is more or less what pulled back the veil to reveal that there was so much more out there for fans of tabletop gaming. It's where I started falling down the rabbit hole of YouTube channels and conventions and game days and really realizing just how big this hobby is. There's an entire hobby space built around these types of games, which very naturally leads into the Castles of Burgundy. This was the game where I discovered that I love midweight Euros, like a lot. In this game, you are building up your personal estate by drafting tiles from a shared board and placing them into different regions on your player mat. Each turn, you roll 2 dice, but instead of the dice telling you what happens, they determine what your options are. You might use 1 die to take a tile from the board and another to place it into your estate. You might ship goods for points. You might take worker tokens that let you modify future dice rolls. And what starts to happen over the course of the game is that you begin building little systems for yourself. Placing certain tiles gives you bonuses that make it easier to place other tiles later. You start chaining actions together, you start planning 2 or 3 turns ahead, and there's something incredibly satisfying about watching that plan actually come together. This was the moment where I realized that I really enjoy games that reward long-term planning and efficient play. Up until Castles of Burgundy, I'd been too intimidated to try these types of games. They seemed so complex at the time, but after my first play, I realized that they aren't that complicated, and they are actually exactly what I'm looking for in terms of weight, length, and intricacy. And finally, we have Jamaica. And this one is less about how the game plays and more about where I played it. Jamaica is a pirate-themed racing game where you are sailing around the island of Jamaica, trying to collect treasure, manage your resources, maybe fire some cannons at other players, and ultimately cross the finish line with enough loot in your hold. Each round, the dice are rolled, and everyone uses those same dice to program their actions for the day and night phases. Maybe you move farther down the path, maybe you load up on food or gunpowder, maybe you prepare for a fight. But the reason this game is on this list is because this was the first game that I played at the first convention that I ever attended. Walking into Grand Con for the first time, seeing table after table after table of people playing games, was the moment that I realized that this was a community that I wanted to be a part of. Everyone that we spoke to was incredibly friendly and welcoming, whether they were new like us or had been attending since year 1. Conventions are now a huge part of my hobby life, and something I start to look forward to again about 5 minutes after the last one ends. So those are the 6 games that made me the board gamer that I am today. And I'm really curious, what are the games that did that for you? I would love to hear what games shaped your tabletop gaming tastes. I want to hear your board game origin story. Let me know down in the comments below, and while you're there, don't forget to like, hype, subscribe, and follow the link in the description to join the Beer City Board Games Discord server to be a part of the conversation. And until next time, let's get another round for the table.